So now I'd like to introduce Noelle Bankston. She's in the Zebra UX team and the Human Factors team, and she's going to be teaching us about user experience for enterprise applications. So thanks, Noelle.
All right, thank you, Dan. So as Dan said, my name is Noelle, and I have two roles. One is a manager of UX research, and specifically looking at service design, which I won't be speaking about today. I will be speaking a little bit more about human factors. I know that both of those roles are often things people don't know what that means. So if I don't cover it, feel free to email me about that. I can talk about my job all the time. But what I'm here to talk to you today about is specifically the design system that we've developed for user experience applications in the enterprise world. So a little bit more background. I've been with Zebra about 3.5 years, and our group sits inside of the innovation and design team, which is part of the chief technology offices. And our role is to craft experiences and interfaces for both new and emerging technologies. So existing tools like our mobile computers, but also thinking about future state things like HUD or different dashboards in the environment. And we work with all the different business units, and we work with developers like yourselves, as well as product managers and other roles. So what are we going to learn about today? Design systems, as I said. So we'll start with, what is a design system? Then why did we create our own design system, since there are others in the world? And then what would be helpful for you all is what are the different elements of it, and how do you take advantage of it as a developer? And you'll notice that the title slides here are all from App Forum. So I gave this talk at App Forum, and I did not change the slides, but they're all still relevant. So we're starting with what is a design system. Guidelines, a library, a framework, a style guide, a blueprint. You may have heard any of these terms to describe a design system. We chose the word system specifically because systems enable us to manage chaos and create better products. So think about that for a moment. Why is that? Inherently to a system, it has a holistic approach. It has an end-to-end solution built into it. And that's why we like to think of this as a system. So that's sort of theoretically, but what is it really? Really, what makes a design system are the different components that come together in a framework, so that the components such as colors and animations, how they work together, how they look and interact, are unified. And design systems are actually not something new. They've been part of the design world for a long time, and I'm going to go over some examples to help you understand what I mean when I'm talking about a design system. So this is the Pantone color system. It's a color library, and this system, like all design systems, are made to make designing more efficient. And how this helps is that a designer in one place might say, I want this element to be red. But what does red mean? There's lots of types of red. And if I'm working across cultures, across time zones and countries, I want to make sure that the red I asked for as a designer is the red that shows up on the final product. So now when I say Pantone red 32-C, I know that that specific color will come out exactly as I intended it. Again, it eases communication and consistency. So next, looking at a physical product, keyboards. Now, we're very familiar with this, and you can see that there is flexibility in the design system. Yet as a user, I know that no matter what keyboard I approach, I'll know how to use it. I mean, imagine a world where every manufacturer that needed a key input system designed their own keyboard. Now, what the hurdle you'd have to overcome to learn how to use that system would be quite high. So designers know this is the basic layout, and that's the constraints that they can design around. And you can see there's still a lot of variation there. And finally, this is a design system I think most of you developers will be the most familiar with. This is Google Material Design. And this is a design system for a digital product as opposed to physical products, which we just looked at. And This allows for a unified experience across platforms, across device sizes, and when you use this system, you know that there'll be a visual language that works no matter how you apply it. So let's look at how design systems are useful and how they're implemented in the real world. So what I'm going to do now is show you two different apps in two different design systems and kind of point out how they work, and we can look at similarities and differences. So I'll start, I'm sure we're all familiar with this, it's LinkedIn, and despite the image of the device, what you have on the left is iOS, and what you have on the right is Android. So ideally I'd have you guys call out, but I know you're not able to do that. So I'm going to give you a pause and give you a moment, and what I want you to look at is what is the same in these two apps and what's different. And then we can think about why. So I'll give you a few seconds just to peruse what you see on the left and what you see on the right. So on the left in the iOS, they're both in home. You've got the navigation across the bottom versus across the top. You have labels versus underlines. And for an action, if you want to post something, on iOS, you're going to type it in here, share an article, photo, idea. It's very explicit. In Google, you have what we call the FAB, the floating action button, and that's part of their design system. And what I want to take away is that it's the same application, right? As a user, I understand what LinkedIn does, and no matter which design system I'm using, I'm getting the same utility out of the application. But by adhering to the design system, the LinkedIn application developers know that the user will understand more quickly how to get around this environment. It matches their expectations for the OS that they're in. So let's look at one more, and same thing. So this is Outlook Calendar, and I'm sure it's quite full for all of you as it is for me. So again, on the left is iOS and on the right is Android. So what's different and what's the same about these two applications in these two design systems? I'll give you a moment. So this time the navigation is across the bottom for both, but the labels are different and the way they color it. We have chat heads for both of those, so that's the same. But the adding a notification or an event is on the upper right for iOS, and it's on the lower right for Android. And one thing I really want to point out here is this floating action button. So what you may or may not notice or appreciate is that this floating action button is not according to the design system. They actually changed it. The size and location are altered from the design system guidelines, and as a result, it competes visually with those chat heads. Imagine if instead of the M in a brown circle, it was an M in a blue circle. It will be quite visually confusing to understand, how do I add an event? So what I want to point out is it is okay to change, to deviate from the design system, but when you do, you have to be very thoughtful and deliberate and understand how those changes affect your interaction. So this is a negative effect, right? Now this is confusing and hard to see. They would have been better following the design system in this case. So again, those are just two examples of how it's the same application, but how they look different when we think about what's the appropriate design system given the ecosystem that this application is living in. And this leads me to, well, so why did we create a design system for Zebra? Why was there a need to differentiate our system from others in the same way there's a need to differentiate iOS and Android? What I'll point to you actually is what's going on in this picture. The reason we have a different system is because fundamentally enterprise user experience is different than consumer user experience. So in this picture, you have the person holding the Zebra device on the right, and they're interacting with someone on the left. That person using the device is using it for an enterprise purpose, right? They're trying to use that device to accomplish a job. It's very efficiency and purpose driven. And that's a big difference than in the consumer environment. That when we make changes in the user experience of enterprise, what we're affecting is productivity and increasing work efficiency. So let me again show you what I mean by the difference in consumer and enterprise. I think all of you are familiar with these golden arches. McDonald's, when you're from the consumer point of view, this might bring, perhaps happy memories of, some McFood that you're about to eat, or at least neutral memories, right, as a consumer. This is the enterprise point of view. It's loud, it's messy, it's stressful, right? These workers are under a time crunch to get this food out, and there's a lot of opportunities to make mistakes. So the big difference between enterprise and consumer, we talk about in the enterprise, the workers here are experiencing what we call situational disabilities. The situations that they're in change the way that they operate and interact with technology. So for example, if you had a handheld device as a consumer, if you drop it out in the area of the dining area, at worst, you might get a nick or a crack. In the enterprise environment, you drop your device, it could end up in the fryer later. So there's a big difference in the stakes. And because of their situation, they might be faced with multiple of these disadvantages at one time. So again, it's loud, it's messy, it may be greasy, they may be wearing gloves. Someone might be trying to give them direction as they're doing something at the same time. And the reason we use the word disability, it's not a mistake. It changes the way that they behave. So we can think of it like a physical disability, except with a physical disability, usually people have experience and practice and understanding how to cope with the disadvantages that they have. With a situational disability, because it's dependent on the situation, it's temporary, and it's very stressful because it's not something we deal with day to day. I'm going to show you a little more about what I mean by that in the enterprise environment by these next 3 photos. So as I said, my background is UX research and human factors. So human factors is very much understanding this. What are the factors that influence how someone is interacting with technology? And UX research is going into the field and seeing how those people, how our users, what problems are they trying to solve? So these 3 photos come from real research that I personally did in the past 3 years on behalf of Zebra. So this first one is a forklift driver. And I want you to notice a few things here. So this is called a cross-dock. He's moving the pallets from one trailer into another trailer. So the cross-docks, they can either be quite cold, which is happening here. This is in the Midwest in January. So you can say he's got gloves on. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but I'll point out he's holding one of our Zebra devices with his gloved hands. How thick those gloves are, you can think about the equivalent disability of arthritis, right? So now it's much harder to type. It's much harder to press a button. You can also see with his arm, not only is he looking at the device screen, he's trying to operate levers while he's driving, which is, of course, a bit of a distraction and difficult to pull off. Similarly, in these environments, they can also be very, very hot. So I have lots of pictures of people with t-shirt and shorts, and it's very sweaty. So next, moving actually indoors to outdoors, this is a baggage handler. So the disadvantages here, if you take a look at this photo, you see he's wearing earmuffs, right? So right away, that's a disability like hearing loss. That's obviously to protect them from the loud jet engines. But now on our device, if we're using a beep to indicate a positive scan, that's not a helpful affordance for this user, right? He's disabled by not being able to hear it. So we might think about what's another way we can give this user that information, because their situational disability does not allow them to use sound as an indicator. And then unlike the other environment, he's outdoors, he's in the bright sunlight. So that will affect his ability to see the screen. So we need to think about what's the right contrast ratio for this enterprise environment. The last thing I want to point out to you is that he's taken off his glove to use his device. As a UX researcher, this is pointing to something that we can optimize, right? He shouldn't have to change how he's working to use our device. So he's taken off his glove, meaning that with his glove there was an issue. So how can we make his work more efficient? A small change where he doesn't have to take that glove off, that saves him time. And this last one is my favorite photo because so much is going on here with this worker. So this is a warehouse worker in a picking environment. He's got a Zebra wrist terminal with a finger scanner, and he's got a mobile printer around his waist. And what you can't see, or maybe you can kind of notice a little bit, but actually on his other wrist is somewhat like a power glove. What he has is a remote controlled forklift, and on that hand he's using the glove to move the forklift to have it follow him. So he's got every appendage covered in devices, and he's trying to interact with his environment. And now this is a low light environment because the way that these warehouses are optimized is to save money on lighting. The lights are off in their motion detector. So as he walks through, it lights up. So he's constantly, in a low lighting, changing light environment. That's, again, very different from the high lighting outdoor environment. So that's more of experiencing low vision. So yeah, again, situational disabilities, a lot going on, trying to get a job done using these tools while dealing with all these environmental challenges. So that's why. That's why we decided to create a design system specifically for enterprise. Next, what I'm going to do is walk you through the design system elements. Now that you understand why we did it, a little bit of the what. So what are the elements and how do these elements help alleviate these frustrations that people are feeling because of these disabilities? We very much thought about accessibility. So some of you might know the principles of inclusive design or accessible design for people with disabilities. We can use a lot of those same principles here. So starting with our framework, we started with Google Material. And the reason for that is most of our apps run on Android, and we want to take advantage of what our users already know, right? Again, lowering that cognitive load. Because human factors involves physical attributes in the environment and the user's essentially mind, right? Their knowledge and understanding. Another reason we use this is that it scales well. So we know that whether it's this type of device or it's a tablet or it's a web application, that it's going to work. So I'm going to go into some of the components now. So color. Maybe as application developers, you're less excited about thinking about the different colors. As a UX team, color is very important. And you think about it from a cognitive method. Colors are not neutral, right? They have meaning. Green generally means good or go, red means stop. So if you look at our main colors, we've chosen the primary colors. They're bold and they're distinct from each other. And that's on purpose, right? So when you think about someone using a purpose-built enterprise device, they're trying to get a job done. So the information, we want to make that salient to say, go, do this. And so that's why those main colors are very bold. And in contrast, we have the neutral colors so that these colors pop. And then we have a whole list of secondary colors that complement well with the Zebra brand, but can be used in any interface. Next, typography. So we chose Roboto for our standard typeface. If you're going to use either Android or web applications, if you're going to use iOS, we've chosen the font San Francisco. And the reason for that is that these are the native typefaces for those OS systems. So as a developer, you don't have to worry about installing a font package. That's already going to be there. So that's good for you. And what's good for the users is that these fonts were designed specifically for readability. So in a low light environment, it's easy to distinguish one letter from the other, one letter or number from the other. Next, themes. We intentionally made two different themes, a dark theme and a light theme. And the reason for that is thinking back to our examples, right? What is the appropriate color in a warehouse versus out on the tarmac? Which is better to see in which environment? And as a UX researcher, that's part of my job, is to understand and test. For each of these environments, we go out as a Zebra UX team and understand what is the best theme for each environment. And as you can see, those bold colors really pop on each one, but in different ways. Oh, and the last thing, sorry, I'll highlight to you as a developer or designer, you might choose to use both, but you might have one as your primary theme and the other as your secondary to create contrast for certain screens. So you have a flow where they're going along in one theme, and then it's really important to highlight a certain screen. You can switch themes, and the two themes still look like they're in the same family. And as a developer or a designer, you have that ability to still highlight that. So next is icons. We are very proud of these, and we actually have someone who designs each one of these icons. What's great about these icons is they're built with a metaphor in mind. It's actually the key to the success of all of these icons. They're simple, visually they're simple, modern, and friendly. We have the enterprise-specific ones, so you can see a barcode scanner there, for example. So there are a lot of icons out there for you to choose from, right? So why choose the zebra ones? Well, because one, they're free. We give them to you for free, and so you don't have to spend time searching on the internet for various ones. But two, when you use them together, you start to get consistency, and your application will fit inside the zebra family. A user will already understand what all these icons mean from their other experiences in the zebra ecosystem. And we have a lot. We have over 375, I think right now, well over that. And the reason I can't give you an exact number is because we're constantly growing more to accommodate different requests. So if you're looking and you don't find one, contact our team, and odds are it's a useful icon for someone else as well, and we can build that. So what I want to show you is I've told you how these hang together as a family. And I think on this slide you can see that better. So this is a small subsection of all of our icons. But you can see visually here quickly how they look like they fit together. They're not jarring in any way, and each one communicates well with the other ones. We call it a family feel of the icons. Another thing that we've done with these icons, again, having them be metaphors, is we can almost build, we call them compound metaphors, but like little sentences with the icons. As simple as if you look in the third row, the fourth and fifth icons in, you see the alarm clock and then the plus with the alarm. I mean, you instantly know that means add an alarm. There are a lot of examples of that where we have an element and then we add an element on top of that and it means something else. So for example, we have a box in the fourth row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in. On the last row, we have an icon that means dimensions, the 3 arrows. When you put those together, you see the next one, a box and the arrows. Now that represents that we have a specific application for parcel dimensioning. So again, with one image, we can combine these meanings, and the more that you use them, the more the users will become literate in our icon terminology, and they'll feel like it's part of the whole system. It will visually connect. So the last slide I have to show you about the specific components is this one. These are common UI elements that we've created. There's way too many here for me to go through one at a time. So I just want to point your example to the one on the far right. That is the the user login screen, our user ABCD1234. So thinking back to, again, helping someone be productive and get a job done. You'll notice that the continue button is continuous with the screen where they input their username and password, possibly scan something in. And if you think about most of the, let's say, e-commerce sites you've worked on or looked at, a lot of times that login or next button will be on the lower right. And that you might have to swipe to get down to that login, or at least move your eyes down to get to that login. We've intentionally put that continue right there with it. And it's in blue, it's in bold, so you know exactly what you need to do next, and you can get there as fast as possible. So again, thinking about someone trying to get a job done, we want to reduce their load, we want to reduce the disability that their situation is putting them under. And we have these enterprise elements built into our UI components to reduce that load. So other things that you'll notice is the size of that continue. It's the size, it goes left to right, and also the height of that. we found a lot about glove use. So the reason it's that width is to accommodate, a finger, a big thumb of a warehouse worker with a glove. They can definitely still hit that button, as opposed to a small button that says the word continue that's just contained just that word, right? We made it large. There are a lot of subtleties here, like color, like the direction of the arrow, that as you move forward, the arrow direction indicates the way that it's going to animate. And so you create a mental model over time. I'm flowing through this application to the right, and if I want to go back, I use the arrow to the left. Things like that. So all of these elements, we've designed them in a way that they can be downloaded using Illustrator or Sketch. So these templates you guys can pull in and use. So let me show you. I've been speaking about how useful they are, but let me show you what that looks like when they all hang together. So first, what I want to point out, these 4 applications, they're specific to Zebra, but these 4 applications were designed by 3 different designers, actually in 2 different continents. So because they all use the design system, though, I mean, I don't have to tell you, they look like they belong in the same ecosystem. And you can see some of these enterprise elements, so bold colors, large hit zones. You can see how clear the text is for each of these. Discoverability, so on the far right, you see those enterprise icons. So the icon for a ring scanner in the consumer world has no meaning, but for someone trying to manage their Zebra peripherals, they'll know exactly what that is. Same with the headset. The last thing I want to point out to you here is that, yes, these are 4 distinct applications, and they hang together as a family because they're in the same system, but they're not boring. They don't look cookie cutter. They don't look like they have no originality. The designers and developers still had the freedom to design this application in a way that was useful and met their needs. We didn't take away that ability to be creative. If you think about it, think about Lego, right? Lego is completely uniform components, and yet it is famous for being the example of endless creativity. So again, a design system helps you look cohesive, but allows you still to be creative. So finally, for developers, what hopefully you're the most interested in is you're thinking to yourself, wow, Noelle, this is great. This will save me time, and I'd love to start using this. How can I use this? So I'm going to go over how we use these elements from sketch to prototype to code. So starting with sketching, once you become familiar with the system, like I said, it is like a language. And even as you're sketching, you have an understanding of how the elements work together and the layout. It can make you go faster. You don't have to think about those decisions as you're sketching, and they look cohesive. And so these images that I'm showing you in this slide and all the others are taken from real designers that were willing to share their sketchbooks with us. And yeah, it helps them move faster and communicate better from the very start of the sketch phase. You could share this with a developer and it would be clear. It wouldn't seem like, oh, this is a sketch, I don't understand what's happening. From prototyping, again, these are downloadable elements, so you can just pull these into the systems you want to use. And we use Illustrator and Sketch as our 2 tools. So again, you can just copy paste, and that allows us to work much, much faster. And finally, the handoff. So we use a tool called Zeppelin, and what's great is that Sketch and Zeppelin work together. So Sketch is the design tool, and Zeppelin is a tool specifically to interface with developers. It has the CSS style guide built in, so you don't have to spend a lot of time essentially fighting back and forth. I told you to put it here, and you moved it over 3 pixels, and I meant this color, but you used the wrong color. Because in that import and sharing process, everything is clear. So let me show you how this works. So this is Sketch. The Zeppelin plugin is there. It's as simple as saying, I would like to export this into Zeppelin. And you tell it where you'd like to put it, which file you have. Hit import. It goes directly into Zeppelin. You can comment, so you can have that communication between the developers and the designers. But what's great is you see here on the right under XML, you see that CSS style guide. So you see things like fonts and colors. You can see the exact pixel distances and icons all defined there. And that saves you time. The designers have to spend time annotating, and the developer doesn't have to spend as much time going back and forth with the designer saying, is this what you meant? Is this what you wanted it to look like? So we find these two tools working together with those UI elements really speeds up our prototyping process. So this is an example from a real project, again, courtesy of a designer who was willing to share their files with us. So you see from sketch in the middle to a quick low fidelity prototype to the final version. And again, you can see how that literacy and design elements, the image on the far left and the far right aren't that different from each other, which is pretty great. And you can see things like hit zones. So in the middle, that quick prototype, it had those ideas, but when they implemented the design on the right, all of those people, their lines like Amberlyn and Chris Thomas, it increases in order to accommodate the UI element style guide that we have of having a wide enough hit zone to accommodate someone with a glove. The floating action button, again, it's in that bright yellow, and it's in a prominent space so that someone can see it quickly and not have to spend time searching the screen. Again, it's all about using these elements to help increase productivity. So that is mostly it at this point. We just want to encourage you to use this system, right? We designed it for you. We designed it to make us all work smarter together, to save time, but importantly, that we can serve our customers by having enterprise-specific solutions. So myself and other members of my team have gone out into the field, into those enterprise environments, looked at the human factors, tweaked certain elements to make sure that it does help address those situational disabilities. We know that a lot of you may be having to do more of the design than perhaps you'd like. Not everyone has a dedicated UX resource. So we want you to know that we've done a lot of that work so that when you import this in, you can feel confident that it does adhere to good UI principles. And we've been using this internally. We've been using it for our own applications successfully. If you look across our family of our applications, they hang together, and you can tell they were designed within this same design system. Again, not necessarily by the same designer, but the designers are all working together to ensure that they're following the design system to be successful. So the last thing I want to point you to is resources. The only caveat here right now is that this website, design.zebra.com, is not currently live. So if you go there, it will just take you back to zebra.com. We are currently building it. We do have an icon library in GitHub, which I forgot to put the link there. So if you would like that, feel free to email me. My email is, I think, probably be shared from the webinar. It's just Noel, N-O-E-L, my first name, @Zebra. Make sure that you can get that. The reusable components will be on this website when it's finalized. So this screenshot is our beta site, but we plan to have all of these available to you now. But feel free to reach out to any of the Zebra contacts you have, and they can put you in connection with us, the UX team, and we'll make sure that you get whatever it is you need, because we really want to see this thrive and flourish so that the Zebra ecosystem, again, is consistent and that our users get the advantage of knowing how to work within the design system.
And Noel, we can add in the link to the GitHub library into the developer portal. Okay. We have a post about this webinar, so we can add that link in there so people can find it easily.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely better than everyone emailing me, because that would be a lot of emails. Yeah, well, so, and go ahead.
It was a great overview, Noel, and I really think that there's some great guidelines here. So, thanks so much for sharing this with all of us. We did have one question that came through, and a lot of the developers we have, they do work with Zebra devices, but they also work with non-Zebra devices. So how many of these tools and these guidelines apply across non-Zebra devices? And what kind of recommendation would you give for those types of ISVs?
Sure, that's a really yeah, that's an interesting point. Well, we like to think that everyone is only using all Zebra devices, so that would be the first solution, is just only use Zebra devices. But since I can't dictate that, I would say, I mean, I think the principles still apply. So it's just why I started with, let me explain to you why we've done it this way intentionally. Certainly, if these live in a Zebra-only ecosystem, they'll be stronger that way. But we still believe that the principles with which they were designed are relevant if you're designing for enterprise. So again, as long as you're designing for an enterprise environment, a lot of these still hold, because again, we took into account situational disabilities. So the spacing, the colors, the interactions, all of those are to address things like people having less mobility in their hands due to gloves, or low visibility or high contrast due to either low lighting or high, strong lighting, having things close together or using color have meaning. All of those things still apply. I think the challenge with someone not using Zebra in a non-Zebra environment is, do they have different paradigms set up in their design system that conflict? So for example, if you're working in a hospital, perhaps red is reserved only for an absolute life or death emergency, in which case you want to make sure not to use that, even though we recommend it for something. Say, well, you know what, I know that specifically for this environment, that doesn't make sense. So I think it's really just being thoughtful about where is this design living in it, taking a step back and saying, what's the ecosystem? Does this element help improve productivity? Does it make my application easier to understand, easier to use for someone who is trying to get a job done and is overloaded in their work environment?
So Noel, what about and also what about just different form factors as well? So even in the Zebra portfolio, there's multiple form factors, from a tablet, and then even mobile computers. You have a bunch of different sizes, and you have the wrist terminal. Are there substantially different ways you'd apply some of these concepts across those?
I would say no. I mean, for the most part, we thought of all of that when we were building it. I can tell you, I sit next to one of the UI designers, and he has 4 devices of different screen sizes next to him, and he's always testing. He's putting them on all 4 to make sure that it still looks correct. But that's why we started with Google Material Design, because it does scale well. These are meant to be responsive. And again, I think the principles still apply. I mean, it's always worth, especially as a UX researcher, I'm going to tell you, always worth doing the research and validating and trying it out on that screen. But we did design them to be scalable because, yes, we know we live in a variable ecosystem. So there are even things like the enterprise keyboard. I don't know if everybody is familiar with that, but we tested that from the wrist terminal, all the way up to the tablet. And there are different affordances built into that to make sure that it works.
Great, thank you. What we also had a question: are the concepts and ideas and material you've shared here, are those copyrighted? And are there any limitations to how people outside of Zebra can use them?
I don't know about copyright. I will leave that to a lawyer. But they're open. We're having them open. So I would assume that means no, because we are sharing them openly. That's the whole point of having this talk, is we want people to know about it and we want them to use it, and we're going to have them available for you to download for free. So we won't know, who's using it and how. So yeah, they're open. They're for you. We develop them for you. I don't know of any restrictions on them, because that's the whole point, is we want this to get out there. And we want it to be useful to as many people as possible.
Okay, thank you. We did have another question on Windows 10 and Windows 10 IoT. Are there any separate or specific guidelines for those devices that Zebra has?
That I don't know. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not sure. Again, I'm speaking on behalf of the wider UX team, but I am really UX research and human factors. So some of those specifics, I'm not 100% sure. I'm trying to think of the best way to get you an answer.
I can share the contact information with you offline so we could do some follow-up.
Okay, yeah.
All right. And let's see, does anyone else have any questions? There's a question box in the GoToWebinar window. So if you have any, please feel free to type them in and we can do our best to get you an answer. I think, Noel, this is, it's like I said before, this is great information. We do have, a lot of people really just trying to come up with, what are some of the best practices, and, with the different really unique use cases that we see in some of these kind of rugged enterprise environments, it's nice to see, your team there that's doing this research and then sharing it out with everyone. So thank you very much.
No problem. We enjoy doing it. And also note, don't worry about having to rate the session in the app forum, mobile app.
However, we would appreciate your feedback on this DevTalk. So once we end this, as you're leaving, there's going to be a little bit of a survey. So, let us know how you liked this session. Let us know how the topic was, and also if you have ideas for future topics. So it doesn't look like we have any other questions. So I just want to again thank you, Noel. And for those on the line, we will be sharing these slides as well as posting the video once we're able to get that up on YouTube. So thank you very much, everyone.